Callista Fielding jolted awake to the sound of her 8-year-old daughter's anguished cry. It was well past midnight, and the small house they shared on the outskirts of Willowdale was cloaked in darkness save for the sliver of moonlight through thin curtains. Her heart pounded as she rushed to Aurelia's bedside, finding the little girl curled up and whimpering. "Mummy, it hurts." Aurelia gasped, tiny beads of sweat on her pale forehead. She clutched her stomach, tears slipping from her golden brown eyes. Panic seized Callista. Aurelia was normally such a bright, energetic child, always dancing around the living room or singing silly songs. To see her in pain like this sent fear slicing through Callista's chest. She gently placed a hand on Aurelia's forehead. Her skin was clammy and cold, yet she was trembling as if caught in a fever. Without wasting another second, Callista scooped her daughter into her arms. Aurelia was light as a feather, far too light, Callista thought with a surge of worry. Had she lost weight recently? Guilt gnawed at her. Between her 2 jobs and night classes, had she missed some sign of her daughter's illness? Welcome to today's story. If you love emotional, heart-gripping tales filled with love, redemption, and second chances, you're in the right place. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe right now so you don't miss what's coming next. Tap the bell icon to get notified when new stories drop, and tell us in the comments. What would you do if your child's life depended on a secret you've kept for years? The drive to Willowdale General Hospital was a blur of speed and prayer. Callista's hands shook on the steering wheel. The normally quiet country roads felt endless, her anxiety amplifying every second. "Hold on, baby, hold on," she whispered, voice quavering as Aurelia whimpered softly on the back seat. "Mummy's here. Just hold on." At the emergency room, nurses whisked Aurelia from Callista's arms onto a gurney. A flurry of medical questions came at her. How long has she been ill? Any known conditions? Callista stammered answers, her mind spinning. It had all happened so suddenly. Aurelia had been perfectly fine at dinner, giggling over the way they burned the macaroni and cheese a little. Now she was pale and faint, her breaths shallow. "We need to run some tests," Dr. Nguyen, the on-call physician, informed her after an initial examination. The doctor's face was calm but serious. Seeing him in his crisp white coat made it all feel more real and far more terrifying. "She's very weak. Has Aurelia experienced any unusual bruising or bleeding lately?" he asked gently. Callista racked her brain. There had been a bruise on Aurelia's leg last week, she recalled. She'd assumed it was from playground roughhousing, and just yesterday, Aurelia had a tiny nosebleed out of the blue, but it stopped quickly. Callista mentioned these details, voice thick with guilt that she hadn't paid more attention. Dr. Nguyen exchanged a glance with a nurse that made Callista's stomach flip. "We're going to take good care of her," he assured. But Callista could see the concern he hid. They drew Aurelia's blood, hooked her up to fluids. Callista hovered by her daughter's bedside, stroking her dark curls and murmuring a shaky lullaby while the child drifted in and out of a pained daze. When the test results came back, the news was dire. Dr. Nguyen sat with Callista in a small consultation room, away from the bustle of the ER. "Your daughter is suffering from severe anemia. Her red blood cell count is dangerously low, which is why she's so weak. It could be due to an autoimmune condition or bone marrow issue. We need more tests to find out the cause. But our immediate concern is stabilizing her." Callista felt the room tilt. Severe anemia? Bone marrow issue? The words were fragments that didn't make sense. She had no medical background, only the instinctual knowledge of a mother that something was very wrong. "Stabilize her." "Yes, please do whatever you need to," she managed to reply, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Nguyen gave a sympathetic nod. "We need to transfuse blood to Aurelia right away to stabilize her oxygen levels and buy time for further treatment. However," he paused, glancing at the chart in his hand, "Aurelia's blood type is very rare. It's AB negative, AB negative." The term rang vaguely in Callista's memory from a pamphlet she once read. It was one of the rarest blood types. Only one in a few hundred people had it. Callista's own blood was a positive, she remembered, because when Aurelia was born, She'd hoped their types would match in case of emergencies, but they didn't. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now her heart sank with fear. Our blood bank is checking for AB negative units, Dr. Nguyen continued, but we don't have any on hand in our small hospital. We've put out an urgent call to larger hospitals in New York City to send some by helicopter, but it could take hours. Aurelia doesn't have that long before her condition becomes critical. Each word felt like a hammer to Callista's chest. Not that long echoed in her ears. Her little girl might not survive the night without blood. Tears she'd been holding back now sprang to her eyes, blurring her vision. There must be someone nearby with AB-negative blood, she cried, desperation creeping into her voice. A donor, anyone. How do we find them? The doctor gently touched her shoulder. We're trying everything. We've alerted the National Donor Registry, but AB-negative is rare. Unless a specific donor is identified, the fastest solution might be a directed donation from a family member. Family member. The words hung in the air. Callista's breath caught. She had no family with that blood type. Her parents were A and O. Her sister was A as well. And Aurelia's father. For a moment, the world stopped. Aurelia's father. The man Callista had hoped to forget, yet never truly could. The man who had no idea he even had a daughter. In 8 years, Callista had never reached out to him. She had promised herself she never would. That chapter of her life was closed, locked away with pain and regret. But now, as her daughter's life hung in the balance, that secret past was the only lifeline left. Her hands trembled as she realized what she must do. Looking up at Dr. Nguyen's expectant face, Callista swallowed hard, tasting fear and resolve. I know someone who might be a match, she said quietly, her voice shaking. Her father. He has AB-negative blood. It felt strange to speak the words aloud, acknowledging that Aurelia had a father beyond. The bedtime stories Callista had spun about a distant star in the sky watching over them. She had never even uttered his name in her daughter's presence. Now, she might have to say it for the first time in years. Dr. Nguyen's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he nodded quickly. If he has AB-negative and is a blood relative, he'd likely be a suitable donor. We'll need him here as soon as possible. Can you contact him? Time is critical. Time. Callista's gaze drifted to the small window of the consultation room, where the night sky was pitch black. How long had it been since they arrived? An hour? 2? In that time, her world had tilted on its axis. Now, to save Aurelia, she would have to confront the one person she'd vowed never to face again. A mixture of emotions swirled in her chest, guilt, fear, even anger. How unfair was fate to force this reckoning now? But a stronger instinct rose above all else. A mother's love. She would walk through fire and crawl on glass to save her child. Facing Aurelia's father, with all the ghosts that would stir, was a small price if it meant her little girl would live. Callista took a shaky breath and nodded to the doctor. I'll call him. I'll get him here, she said, injecting as much strength into her voice as she could muster. As Dr. Nguyen left her to make the arrangements, Callista pulled out her phone with unsteady fingers. She stared at the screen, heart thudding. She had kept no trace of Alistair Davenport in her life, no photos on her walls, no contacts in her phone. Yet his number was etched in her memory, a relic from a past she could not forget. Her fingers hovered over the dial pad. Would he still have the same number after all these years? Even if he did, would he answer an unknown call in the middle of the night? And if he answered, what would she even say? A soft moan from down the hall reminded her that Aurelia didn't have time for doubts. Steeling herself, Callista dialed the number she had whispered in her dreams and nightmares for years. Each ring felt like an eternity. She pressed her palm to her mouth, praying silently. On the 4th ring, just as she feared it would go to voicemail, a deep, groggy voice answered. Hello? Who is this? Callista's throat went dry. That voice, rich, cultured, and edged with concern, was unmistakably his. It sent a jolt through her, a rush of memories and emotions she had no time to unpack. Summoning every ounce of courage, she spoke into the phone, voice trembling but urgent, delivering the words that would change all of their lives forever. "Alistair, it's me, Callista. I need your help. It's about our daughter. She needs your blood. It's the only thing that can save her life." 9 years earlier, upstate New York, Columbia University campus. Callista stepped out of the library into the late spring sunshine, juggling a stack of textbooks in her arms. As a scholarship student in her final year of college, she spent most of her days either in class, at the campus coffee shop where she worked part-time, or tucked away in the library's quiet corners studying. Today, with finals looming, she had lost track of time in a research haze, and was now rushing to catch the shuttle back to her off-campus apartment. In her haste, Callista didn't notice the man coming around the corner until it was too late. She collided with a solid chest, and her pile of textbooks went cascading to the ground. Papers fluttered everywhere. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she gasped, immediately kneeling to gather her scattered notes. "It's my fault. I wasn't watching where I was going," came a warm, cultured male voice from above. Callista looked up, tucking a stray lock of her honey-brown hair behind her ear. A tall, strikingly handsome student had already crouched down to help her. The sunlight caught his ash blonde hair and the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. He gave her a lopsided, apologetic smile as he held out one of her notebooks. She recognized him, Alistair Davenport. They'd had a literature class together the previous semester, though they'd never formally spoken. He was somewhat famous on campus, top of the class, captain of the debate team, and rumored heir to some big family business fortune. Callista had always assumed someone like him, polished, confident, effortlessly popular, wouldn't notice a girl like her. Yet here he was, gently stacking her textbooks and apologizing as if the mishap were entirely his doing. "Thank you," Callista mumbled, cheeks flushing as she accepted the books from him. She hoped he couldn't hear how loudly her heart was hammering from the sudden collision and his proximity. "I remember you," Alistair said, tilting his head thoughtfully. "Callista, right? We took contemporary American literature together. You wrote that brilliant paper on Toni Morrison's use of symbolism." Callista blinked in surprise. He remembered her name and her paper. "Yes, that's me," she replied softly. "And you're Alistair. You did that presentation on Fitzgerald's lost short stories." She remembered more than she intended to admit. The commanding way he spoke in front of the class, the passion in his voice when he quoted lines from books. His smile widened. "Guilty. And slightly impressed you recall that. Most people slept through my Fitzgerald rambling." Callista found herself smiling back. "It was a good presentation. You made it interesting." They both rose to their feet, Callista hugging her books to her chest. She suddenly felt self-conscious. Her shoes were scuffed from running between jobs, and her thrifted sundress, though neat, was not the kind of designer outfit many girls on campus wore. Meanwhile, Alistair wore a crisp button-down rolled at the sleeves, casual but clearly expensive. She noticed a sleek watch on his wrist that likely cost more than her semester's rent. Yet his manner was friendly and unaffected. "Are you heading to the shuttle?" he asked, nodding toward the bus stop where a few students waited. "Oh, yes," Callista said, a little embarrassed. The campus shuttle was mostly used by students who lived in cheaper housing off campus. Many of the wealthier students hardly knew it existed, since they often had cars. "Mind if I walk with you?" Alistair offered, adjusting the strap of the leather satchel slung over his shoulder. "Sure," she replied, trying to sound casual despite the flutter in her stomach. As they walked across the quad together, their conversation came easily. Alistair asked about her major, English, like him, and her plans after graduation. She explained that she was hoping to get a job as an editor or a teacher, something stable to help pay off loans and support her family back home in Willowdale. In turn, he shared a bit about his own path. He was slated to attend Harvard Law School in the fall. He said it matter-of-factly, but Callista could sense a note of reluctance in his voice. "Law school? Wow," Callista remarked. "You must be excited. Harvard's a big deal." Alistair shrugged, kicking a pebble on the path as they walked. It's the family plan. My father's a senator turned businessman, very old school. He wants me to get the credentials and eventually take over at Davenport Industries. He glanced at her, as if expecting judgment or awe when mentioning his family's company, a name that indeed rang a bell for Callista. Davenport Industries was often in the news, known for real estate and tech investments, but Callista only nodded kindly. Do you want that too? She asked. He paused, seemingly surprised by the question. They reached the shuttle stop, but the bus hadn't arrived yet. Alistair took a deep breath of the spring air. He began, then gave a half smile. Honestly, I love debate and literature more than boardrooms and balance sheets, but it feels like my life's been charted out for me since birth. So, I'll go to law school, get the degree, and step into the role expected of me. There was a quiet resignation in his tone that tugged at Callista's heart. She could see the weight he carried, expectations as heavy as the textbooks in her arms. It was a weight of a different kind from hers. Her burdens were financial worries, her widowed mother's needs, and an eagerness to prove herself. His were legacy and pressure to fit a mold. That sounds like a lot of pressure, she said softly. Do you ever wish you could do something else? Alistair met her eyes, and for a moment his confident facade slipped, revealing vulnerability. Sometimes I wish I could just be free for a while, travel, write, maybe take a year to do something meaningful on my own terms. But I don't want to disappoint my family. The rumble of the approaching shuttle bus cut short the conversation. As it pulled up, Callista realized she was reluctant to part ways. She had glimpsed a side of Alistair she never expected, the human beneath the polished surface. Impulsively, before boarding, she said, "If you ever need someone to talk to or share Fitzgerald ramblings with, I'm a good listener." She flashed a shy smile. "And I'm around all summer. I'll be working at the Brewhouse Cafe on campus." Alistair's face lit up as he reached into his satchel and pulled out a sleek business card and pen. Scribbling something on the back, he handed it to her. "That's my number. I'd like to hear your ramblings too, you know, especially if they're about Toni Morrison or any other literary loves." He grinned. Callista took the card, their fingers grazing for a brief second. Her cheeks warmed. "I'll text you," she promised. As she stepped onto the shuttle and it pulled away, Callista glanced out the window. Alistair stood on the curb watching her leave, the afternoon sun casting a glow around him. She couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Her heart swelled with a fluttery excitement she hadn't felt in years. In that serendipitous moment, a connection had sparked between two very different worlds, the small-town scholarship girl and the golden boy of a wealthy dynasty. Neither could guess how profoundly that chance encounter would change their lives. Over the following weeks, that spark grew into a gentle flame. Alistair did text her, later that very evening in fact, with a quote from a Toni Morrison novel that made her laugh. True to his word, he showed up at the Brewhouse Cafe the next week while she was working an early shift. He sat in the corner with a novel, stealing glances at her until she worked up the nerve to take her break and join him. Their coffee meetups became regular. Alistair would walk her home after closing up the cafe, the two strolling, under the canopy of oak trees lining the streets off campus. They talked for hours about everything. Books that moved them, childhood stories, his dreams, of writing a novel someday, her responsibilities back home with her mom and kid sister. With each conversation, they peeled back another layer, learning and accepting each other in a way Callista had never experienced before. She found herself looking forward to every message, every meeting. Alistair was not just charming and intelligent, he was unexpectedly kind and down to earth. He remembered the little things she mentioned, like how she loved the smell of old bookstores or that she'd once won a county science fair in 10th grade, and would surprise her with thoughtful gestures. One evening he brought her a worn first edition of her favorite novel, saying he found it in a quaint used bookstore, and it called out her name. The book must have cost a small fortune, but when she protested, he only smiled and said it was an investment in a future famous editor. Despite their different backgrounds, being with Alistair felt easy and right. Still, Callista couldn't fully shake her insecurities. One warm evening in June, they attended a campus open-air concert together. Alistair had invited her as his date, and she'd nervously agreed, wearing her best dress, a simple navy blue A-line she'd found on sale. When they arrived, some of his friends were there, friends with last names Callista recognized from philanthropy galas and buildings on campus. They were polite, but she felt their curious eyes on her, assessing the girl on Alistair's arm. He, however, seemed oblivious to any awkwardness, keeping his hand securely around hers, whispering jokes to make her giggle and fetching drinks for them both. Later that night, sensing her unease, he led her away from the crowd. They found a quiet spot beneath a willow tree by the campus lake, the distant music blending with the chirp of crickets. Alistair brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "You okay?" "You've been quiet," he murmured, concern in his eyes. Callista bit her lip. "Your friends were nice. She hesitated, then sighed. "I feel a little out of place, I guess. Like I don't fit in your world." Alistair's expression softened. He gently tilted her chin up so she met his gaze. "My world?" "Callista, when I'm with you, that is my world. The rest—" He gestured vaguely toward the distant laughter of the party. "They don't matter. Not if they make you feel less than the incredible woman you are." Her breath caught at his words. "Do you really mean that?" she whispered. Instead of answering immediately, Alistair cupped her face in his palms. His touch was feather-light, yet it sent a thrilling warmth through her. "I've never felt this way about anyone," he confessed softly. "You make me feel like I can be myself, the self I actually want to be, not the one I have to be. I'm sorry if tonight made you uncomfortable. I promise, I don't care what anyone thinks. He looked deeply into her eyes, and Callista saw vulnerability and desire mingling in those hazel depths. Her heart thundered. She knew what was coming, and she wanted it too, more than anything. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Alistair leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender and hesitant at first, then growing in warmth as Callista responded. She let her books fall to the grass and wrapped her arms around his neck. Under the willow tree, bathed in silver moonlight and distant music, they sealed promises their hearts were only beginning to understand. That night, Callista realized she was falling deeply in love with Alistair Davenport, and for a time it seemed he was equally in love with her. The summer stretched ahead of them full of hope and possibility, too young. Souls blissfully unaware of the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The blissful summer of love did not last forever. By the time August arrived, a sense of reality began to intrude on Callista and Alistair's idyllic bubble. Alistair's departure for Harvard Law was only a few weeks away. They spent every moment they could together, but an unspoken worry hung. Between them, what would happen to their relationship once he left? One sweltering afternoon, Alistair invited Callista to meet his mother for the first time. She insisted, he said, with a rueful smile. "I think she's curious about the girl I've been spending all my time with." Callista's stomach fluttered with nerves as she dressed in a modest floral blouse and skirt that day. She had heard of Vivian Davenport in the news, a formidable philanthropist and socialite known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. Alistair had always spoken respectfully of his mother, but Callista sensed he was a little nervous too. "Just be yourself," he encouraged, squeezing her hand. "She'll love you because I love you." They drove an hour out of the city to the Davenport estate in Westchester. The mansion loomed large and intimidating behind wrought-iron gates. Callista felt a world away from her humble upbringing as they stepped into a marble foyer decorated with oil paintings of stern-looking ancestors. Vivian Davenport greeted her son with a light kiss on the cheek, then turned to appraise Callista with a polite but cool smile. She was a striking woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in ivory silk. Her eyes, hazel like her son's, held a glint that made Callista feel immediately self-conscious. Over iced tea in the sunroom, the conversation was civil, if a bit stilted. Vivian asked about Callista's studies and family, nodding at the appropriate moments. Callista answered as politely as she could, trying to hide her trembling hands by folding them in her lap. Alistair, sensing her discomfort, kept an arm around her or his fingers interlaced. With hers, a gesture of support that Vivian's gaze noticed each time. "So, Callista," Vivian said at length, her tone pleasant but her words pointed. "Alistair tells me you're quite the academic. Graduating with honours, is it? And from a small town upstate, I believe? Willowdale, was it?" "Yes, ma'am," Callista replied. "Willowdale is my hometown. It's quiet, but I owe a lot to the community there. They supported me and raised funds for my scholarship." "How?" "Community-oriented," Vivian replied, a subtle edge in her voice that only Callista seemed to catch. "And after graduation? What are your plans?" Callista hesitated, feeling the weight of the older woman's scrutiny. "I'm exploring job opportunities. I've applied to a few publishing companies in the city, but I also have family responsibilities back home, so I might return to Willowdale for a while to help out." She didn't mention her mother's health issues or the bills that were piling up since her father's death. It felt too personal to share. Vivian gave a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Family is important. I'm sure you understand, then, how much we Davenports value our family legacy and Alistair's future." Alistair cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "Mother," he began, but Vivian raised a manicured hand to gently hush him. "Let me finish, darling," she said softly to her son, before fixing her gaze back on Callista. "It's wonderful that you and Alistair have had time together, but with him heading to Harvard and then into the family business, he'll have very little time for distractions." "Distractions?" Callista repeated, heat rising to her cheeks. Vivian's smile tightened. "You seem like a lovely girl, Callista, so I will be frank. My son has a very important path ahead. Law school, a career that will influence many. It requires focus and the right connections. A serious relationship at this point, particularly one that might not be aligned with his long-term interests, could hinder his progress." Alistair sat up straighter, a frown creasing his brow. "Mother, stop. Callista isn't a hindrance to me." Vivian patted his hand dismissively, her eyes never leaving Callista. "Sweetheart, I'm merely stating practicalities. Young love is charming, but it doesn't pay tuition or pave a career. And long distance rarely works out. I'm sure a bright girl like Callista plans to build a career of her own, not follow a man across the country and give everything up. Isn't that right?" Callista felt as if she'd been slapped, even though Vivian's tone remained genteel. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Was she being asked to confirm she wouldn't follow Alistair? That she had no place in his future? Alistair's face flushed with anger. "I won't let you talk about her like she's not standing right here, Mother. We haven't decided exactly how to handle next year, but we love each other. We'll find a way to make it work." "Love?" Vivian interrupted, with a light laugh that sounded almost sympathetic. "You're young, both of you. Sometimes love isn't enough in the face of reality. Callista has her family depending on her, I'm sure, and you have obligations to yours. Be reasonable, Alistair. This summer fling—" "It's not a fling," he growled. "Mother, I mean it. I love her." He stood, taking Callista's hand and pulling her gently to stand as well. Callista's heart was thudding painfully. Part of her wanted to flee that very second, but Alistair's grip was a lifeline. Vivian's expression cooled by degrees. She stood as well, a few inches shorter than her son, but somehow seeming to tower over them both with her presence. "Alistair, darling, if you're saying you intend to continue this relationship, we need to have a more serious discussion. Perhaps alone," she said, casting a pointed glance at Callista. Callista felt tears burning behind her eyes, humiliation and hurt swelling in her chest. She gently squeezed Alistair's hand. "Maybe I should wait outside," she whispered. As much as she hated leaving him to face his mother alone, she felt paralyzed under Vivian's glare. Alistair looked torn, but he nodded slightly. "I'll be right out, I promise," he told her, his thumb brushing reassuringly over her knuckles. Callista turned and walked out of the sunroom, her eyes stinging. She found her way through the labyrinthine hall to the front door and stepped onto the porch, gulping in the warm summer air. Her hands were trembling. From inside, muffled voices escalated. She heard the sharp tone of Vivian and Alistair's raised voice responding, though she couldn't make out the words. It felt wrong to eavesdrop, so Callista moved farther down the walkway, coming to rest on a bench beneath a magnolia tree. The sweet fragrance was at odds with the bitter scene that had just unfolded. She didn't know how much time passed. 10 minutes? 30? Each second stretched agony. Finally, the front door opened, and Alistair came striding out, looking frustrated and upset. Callista stood to meet him as he approached. He immediately gathered her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry about that. I had no idea she'd—" Callista pulled back enough to search his face. "What did she say?" Alistair's jaw worked. "Nothing I care to repeat. She doesn't understand. She thinks we haven't thought things through. She wants me to focus on school. But I told her I'm not giving you up." His eyes blazed with fierce determination. Hope and fear warred in Callista's chest. What happens now?" He took a deep breath. "I'm going to get a place off campus in Cambridge. It's expensive, but I have savings. After I settle in, you can join me there if you want. Maybe transfer or find work in Boston. We'll make it work, Cal. I won't let her or anyone else dictate my heart." Callista's eyes filled with tears, of love for this man willing to fight for her, and of dread, because deep down, Vivian's words had already planted seeds of doubt. How long could Alistair push away his powerful family's wishes? Would he one day resent Callista if being with her meant strife with his parents and divergence from his path? Still, she forced a smile and nodded. "Okay, we'll figure it out." She wanted to believe it with all her heart. 2 weeks later, summer was ending, and so was their time in New York. Alistair was set to drive up to Cambridge the next morning. Callista had not fully committed to moving yet. She told him she needed a bit more time to arrange things in Willowdale and ensure her mum was stable before joining him. He was understanding, though clearly hoped she'd come sooner rather than later. They promised to call and text every day. That final evening, they shared lingering kisses and whispered promises in the emptiness of Alistair's campus apartment. He gave her a beautiful white gold necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. "So you won't forget me," he teased, as he clasped it around her neck. She couldn't hold back tears as she assured him there was no chance of that. Alistair cupped her face and said softly, "This isn't goodbye. It's just, see you soon. As soon as you can, come to me, Callista. I'll be waiting." She nodded, choking back emotion. "I will. I love you." "I love you too," he replied, kissing her once more with aching tenderness. The next day, he was gone. They exchanged messages throughout his drive. That night, he called to say he missed her and had arrived safely. Callista tried to sound cheerful as she sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by boxes of her own packed belongings. She was nearly ready to leave for Boston herself in a week's time. She should have felt excited. Instead, a growing unease gnawed at her. Her mother's health had taken a bad turn that week, with another scare at the clinic. Medical bills loomed. Could Callista really leave her mom and sister behind now? And what about a job in Boston? She had no offers there yet. Meanwhile, Vivian Davenport's warnings replayed in her mind. The very next day, as Callista was weighing her choices, a sleek black car pulled up outside her little apartment in Willowdale. To her shock, Vivian Davenport stepped out, impeccably dressed even in the summer heat, and knocked on Callista's door. Callista let her in, heart pounding. She hadn't told Alistair she was visiting home, but clearly his mother had found out where to find her. Vivian surveyed the cramped living room with a dispassionate eye before getting straight to the point. "Alistair might have accepted a delay in you following him," Vivian said coolly, "but we both know where this is headed. You won't go. You belong here with your family. My son will be consumed by law school. Long distance will erode whatever naive dreams you two have. It's better to cut the cord now than let it fray slowly." Callista squared her shoulders, anger flaring through her sadness. "With all due respect, Mrs. Davenport, that's for Alistair and me to decide. I know you don't approve of me, but—" Vivian held up a checkbook, The gesture so stereotypical it stunned Callista into silence. The older woman's hand trembled just slightly, betraying that this confrontation was not as easy for her as her icy demeanor suggested. I'm prepared to offer you financial assistance. Think of it as a scholarship or grant. Enough to cover your mother's medical expenses and your sister's schooling, perhaps. You could make a better life for them here, without worrying about Alistair's future, or yours. Callista's eyes widened in disbelief and outrage. You think you can pay me to leave your son? I don't want your money, Mrs. Davenport. Vivian's jaw tightened. This isn't about what you want, it's about what's best for everyone. If you truly care for Alistair, you don't want to see him hurt. You staying in his life will only cause him pain down the road, pain and distraction from his calling. And frankly, given your current circumstances, you have more to gain from this check than from clinging to a relationship doomed to collapse. Be sensible. Hands balled into fists at her sides, Callista felt tears of humiliation burn in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I love your son. I would never hurt him. Why do you assume our relationship would fail? Vivian pursed her lips, as if weighing whether to soften the blow. She chose not to. Because, dear, you and Alistair come from two very different worlds. In his world, you will always be an outsider. People will talk. They'll say you chased him for his money, that you're beneath him. Eventually, even the strongest love can wither under such pressure. Alistair would be forced to choose between you and his family, his legacy. Is that a burden you really want him to bear? Each word felt like poison dripping into Callista's ear. It echoed her own fears, the ones she never spoke aloud. She felt her resolve wavering. Vivian pressed on, seeing the hesitation. If you care for him, spare him the eventual heartache. Let him focus. If it's truly meant to be, perhaps your paths will cross again in the future once he's established. But right now, you both have responsibilities in separate places. Take this help for your family and end things cleanly. He'll thank you one day for being wise when he was too blinded by youthful infatuation to see clearly. Callista stood trembling. A part of her wanted to scream at Vivian to leave and never come back, but another part, painfully logical, whispered that maybe Vivian was right, not about everything but about the challenges ahead. Callista's mother really did need her. Her sister needed her. Alistair's life was racing forward into a realm she had no roadmap for, while hers was tethered here by duty and circumstance. Her silence seemed to embolden Vivian. The woman took out a pen and scribbled an amount on a check, then placed it on the coffee table between them. Callista didn't glance at the figure, but she caught a glimpse enough to know it was more money than she'd ever seen in her life, enough to solve nearly all her immediate problems. Vivian stepped back, smoothing her skirt. Her voice gentled slightly. I do what I do out of love for my son, you understand. He is my only child. I have to ensure he stays on the right path. I suspect you understand sacrifice, Callista. This is your chance to do something good for everyone involved. With that, Vivian Davenport turned and left, leaving the check glinting on the table like bait. Tears flowed freely once she was alone. Callista sank onto her threadbare sofa, hands covering her face as silent sobs racked her. Could she do it? Could she sacrifice her own happiness, sacrifice Alistair's happiness now, to secure his future and help her family? Her gaze fell on the crescent moon necklace around her neck, the symbol of Alistair's love. With trembling fingers, she unclasped it, knowing what she had to do. For her mother, for her sister, for Alistair's bright future, and for the tiny new life she had just discovered was growing inside her. Yes, just days earlier, Callista had taken a pregnancy test after suspecting her missed period wasn't due to stress alone. The test was positive. She was carrying Alistair's child. She had been overjoyed and terrified all at once, pondering how to tell him, imagining their baby inheriting his warm eyes or her smile. But Vivian's appearance had shattered those hopeful daydreams. Now Callista saw the truth. If the Davenport family already deemed her unworthy, a baby born out of wedlock would only make things worse. They might even try to take the child from her, claim custody under the guise of giving it a better life. The thought made her blood run cold. No, she couldn't risk that. This baby was hers to protect, and she would protect it the only way she knew how, by disappearing from Alistair's world entirely. That very night, Callista wrote a letter to Alistair. Her hands trembled as she lied through inked words, telling him she had decided not to come to Boston, that she realized their lives were too different, that she didn't love him enough to sacrifice everything. Each sentence broke her heart, but she steeled herself by imagining Alistair's mother reading the words and feeling victorious. At least this way, Vivian might leave them alone, mother and unborn child, to live in peace. She made no mention of the pregnancy, that secret she would carry to her grave if she had to. She didn't touch the check on the table until she sealed the envelope. Then, with a sense of finality, Callista ripped the check into tiny pieces. Let Vivian think she took the money. Perhaps it would solidify the break, but she refused to actually accept a cent of Davenport charity. Before she could lose her nerve, Callista drove to the post office and mailed the letter to Alistair's new Cambridge address, tears blurring the ink on the copy she kept for herself. It was done. The next morning, with her car packed and her heart shattering, Callista left New York. She couldn't bear to stay and possibly face Alistair if he came looking. Instead, she moved to a distant town 3 states away where an old friend had helped her find a job. In the cover of dawn, she fled, leaving behind the man she loved to protect the child he didn't even know existed. As the miles stretched between them, Callista cried until she had no tears left. She tried to convince herself she was doing the right thing, the noble thing, but deep down, she felt like she had died inside. Somewhere on the road, she clutched her flat abdomen and whispered, aloud to her unborn baby, voice trembling, "I'll take care of you. I promise, even if it's just us two, I'll make sure you're safe and loved." In the silence that followed, Callista felt both the weight of her choice and the faintest spark of hope. She would endure whatever loneliness came, so long as her child had a chance. At life, free from the judgment and conditions of the Davenport world. Thus, with a single heartbreaking decision, Callista Fielding erased herself from Alistair Davenport, his life, keeping their baby a secret he would never know, until fate decided otherwise. Alistair Davenport sat bolt upright in his bed, the last echoes of a familiar name, Callista, still ringing in his ear from the late-night call. For a moment, he wondered if he was dreaming. But the adrenaline surging through his veins and the hammering of his heart told him it was all too real. He had not heard Callista's voice in over 8 years, and now here she was, calling out of the blue in the dead of night. And what she had said, "Our daughter needs your blood to save her life." He was still gripping the phone, knuckles white. "Callista," he spoke urgently, swinging his legs out of bed, already reaching for a shirt. "Where are you? What hospital? Tell me everything quickly." Her voice trembled as she explained the situation. Willowdale General, severe anemia, AB negative blood needed. Her words came rushed and choked with fear. Alistair's mind spun. A daughter? He had a daughter? Questions swirled, but one thing was clear above all else. A child's life hung in the balance. His child, if Callista was to be believed, and in his gut he knew she spoke the truth. There was no time for shock or indignation. He had to get to them. "I'm coming, Callista." He interrupted her softly. "Hang on. I'll be there as soon as humanly possible. I promise." He hung up and sprang into action. Alistair's penthouse apartment in Manhattan was usually a haven of order, but within minutes he had transformed it into chaos, yanking on a pair of jeans and a sweater, tossing necessities into a duffel. His mind raced with 1,000 emotions. A daughter. Callista had borne his child and never told him. A flare of anger ignited at that thought, but he quashed it down. Anger could wait. The little girl, his little girl, needed him now. He called his personal assistant, rousing him from sleep with terse instructions to arrange the company helicopter immediately. Money and connections had their privileges. Within 15 minutes, Alistair was aboard his private chopper, the rotors slicing through the night sky as they lifted off the helipad atop Davenport Tower. The pilot had been given the coordinates for Willowdale's small hospital. As the city lights dwindled beneath him, Alistair forced himself to breathe slowly. He pressed a fist against his chest, as if that could steady the fierce pounding of his heart. Memories he had long tried to bury came flooding back with each breath. Callista's laughter on warm summer nights, her face at the moment of their last kiss, the gut-wrenching pain of reading her letter saying she didn't love him anymore, the letter that broke him so badly he'd never fully healed. And now a new memory to be, the image of a daughter he had never known, lying pale and fragile in a hospital bed. A surge of protectiveness and fear, unlike anything he'd felt before, coursed through him. "Please, let me make it in time," he silently prayed, eyes shut tight for a moment. He had no idea what kind of relationship he would have with this child going forward. He could barely process that he was a father, but he knew one thing for certain: he could not let her die. The helicopter made the normally 3-hour journey in under an hour. They landed in a clearing not far from the hospital, where an ambulance was already waiting. To rush him the final mile, his assistant had coordinated with the hospital staff. As Alistair strode through the emergency entrance, doctors and nurses quickly ushered him onward, having been alerted to expect him. He barely heard their introductions. An older nurse guided him toward the lab to draw his blood for an immediate, direct transfusion, but he paused in the corridor when he saw Callista. She was standing under the harsh fluorescent lights, arms wrapped around herself in the same way she used to when bracing against the cold. Her hair, those soft brown waves he used to thread his fingers through, was pulled into a messy braid, and her face looked ghostly pale, eyes red-rimmed from crying. She wore a faded sweatshirt and jeans, clothes rumpled from stress. Yet to him, in that moment, she was the most heartbreaking sight he'd ever seen. "Callista," he breathed, his voice a mix of relief, worry, and the heartache of 1,000 unspoken sentiments. Her eyes snapped to his, wide and glassy with tears. "Alistair," she whispered. For a second, neither of them moved. In her gaze, he saw 8 years of longing and sorrow flash by. But before either could say more, a doctor hurried up. "Mr. Davenport, thank you for coming so quickly," Dr. Nguyen said, cutting through the charged moment. "We need to verify you're a compatible donor and start the transfusion immediately. Your blood type is AB negative, correct?" Alistair tore his attention from Callista and nodded. "Yes, take whatever you need. Just save my daughter." The words felt foreign, and yet right as he said "my daughter." He didn't even know the child's name yet, but he silently vowed he would learn everything about her if he were given the chance. If your heart's pounding right now, pause for a second and give this video a like. Stories like this remind us that love doesn't always follow the rules, but it always finds a way back. Comment Team Callista if you believe in second chances, or Team Alistair if you think true love deserves redemption. Subscribe to the channel to stay with us through every twist and every reunion still to come. They guided him into a small room where a phlebotomist was ready. As the needle pierced his vein and dark red blood began flowing into a collection bag, Alistair exhaled slowly. His free hand clenched into a fist. He caught a glimpse of Callista hovering anxiously just outside the door, watching him with a mix of gratitude and guilt. Their eyes met again. This time, she managed a weak, tremulous smile, a silent thank you laden with relief. After drawing a pint, the medical team hurried to set up the transfusion for the little girl. Though light-headed, Alistair insisted on walking to the pediatric ICU cubicle where his daughter lay. Dr. Nguyen allowed it, provided he stayed out of the way as they hooked up the life-saving blood. Callista walked beside Alistair, close but not quite touching. He could feel the warmth of her presence, and it was both comforting and agonizing. So many times he had imagined what he would say or do if he ever saw her again. Now none of those words came, only a taut silence born of urgency and unresolved heartache. They reached the bedside. Alistair's breath caught in his throat. The little girl lying there looked so small against the pillows. An IV drip and monitors surrounded her, the heart monitor beeping steadily but slowly. Her complexion was ashen, lips nearly colorless. She was asleep, or unconscious, he wasn't sure which, eyelids fluttering faintly as the nurse gently inserted the needle that would deliver Alistair's blood into her vein. And though he had never seen her before, Alistair knew in an instant this was his child. Her hair was a dark chestnut shade, damp with sweat and curling at the ends. Hair that reminded him of Callista's. But it was the little girl's face that struck him hardest, even in illness. He recognized the familiar shape of her cheeks, the curve of her brow. It was like looking at a piece of himself combined with Callista, embodied in this fragile young form. His eyes stung with tears he hadn't realized were gathering. He moved closer, almost in a trance, until he stood at the opposite side of the bed from the doctor. Gently he reached out to touch the child's hand, which was so small and cool. A strange, overwhelming feeling welled up in him. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not the years of hurt, not the questions of why Callista had hidden her, not the world outside. Only this precious little life, fighting for survival. Her name is Aurelia, Callista said softly from across the bed, breaking the silence. Her voice wavered. I never got to tell you. Aurelia, Alistair repeated under his breath. His throat tightened. What a beautiful name. He wondered if Callista had chosen it because it sounded a bit like his own name, or perhaps for its meaning. He dimly recalled the Latin root aurum, meaning gold. Golden like the flecks in Aurelia's eyes, he guessed, if they were anything like Callista's. Dr. Nguyen checked the transfusion line and nodded in satisfaction as the blood, his blood, flowed into Aurelia's arm. The transfusion is underway. Now we watch and hope it stabilizes her. Alistair looked up sharply. It will work, won't it? He asked, voice unsteady. He realized he was holding Aurelia's hand between both of his now, as if willing his strength into her. The doctor offered a cautious smile. Her body should respond well. The new blood will help carry oxygen to her tissues. If all goes well, she should regain strength by morning. This is a stopgap. We'll still need to address the underlying cause, but this transfusion is what she critically needed tonight. Callista let out a breath that sounded like a half-sob, half-sigh of relief. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes brimming as she looked to the doctor and then to Alistair. Thank you for coming. Alistair met her gaze, an emotional storm brewing behind his calm facade. There's nothing to thank me for, he said quietly. He glanced at Aurelia, stroking her small hand gently with his thumb. I only wish I'd known sooner, that either of you needed me. Callista bit her lip and looked away, shame etched on her face. Before she could respond, the doctor cleared his throat tactfully. We'll let the transfusion continue for a while. Maybe you both should get some rest. It's been an eventful night. Alistair was bone-tired and dizzy from the blood loss, but he shook his head. I'm not leaving her side. He glanced over at Callista, unsure if his presence was too much for her. That is, if it's all right that I stay. Callista wiped a tear from her cheek. Of course you can stay. She's your daughter. The words came out soft, almost apologetic. Hearing Callista acknowledge, that was like a balm and a twist of the knife all at once. Alistair just nodded. A nurse brought a chair for each of them. Through the remaining hours of the night, Alistair and Callista sat vigil on either side of Aurelia. The little girl's breathing grew stronger, and her cheeks slowly warmed with a hint of color as the minutes ticked by. Alistair found himself silently telling her all the things he would do once she recovered. He would buy her the world if she wanted it. He would never miss another day of her life. He would be the father she deserved, if Callista allowed it. That thought made him steal a glance across the bed at Callista. She was leaning forward, watching Aurelia's face with an expression of pure love and remorse. In the quiet, Alistair could not hold back any longer. Why? He whispered, the single word heavy with years of pain. Callista lifted her eyes to his. Fresh tears glistened there. She knew exactly what he was asking. Why had she left? Why hadn't she told him about their child? Why had she kept this secret? Her lips parted, but no answer came immediately. Perhaps it was a conversation for another time, when Aurelia wasn't between them in a hospital bed. So Alistair just nodded silently, turning his attention back to their sleeping daughter. The questions would have to wait a little longer. Right now, he needed to make sure Aurelia lived to hear the answers. As dawn's first light crept into the sky outside, Aurelia stirred softly. Both parents sat up, hopeful. The little girl's eyes fluttered open. Hazel eyes, Alistair realized, with a jolt so like his own, and she looked at Callista first. "Mummy," Aurelia mumbled weakly. "I'm here, sweetheart," Callista cooed, reaching to smooth Aurelia's hair, her voice overflowing with relief. "I'm here." Aurelia then noticed the strange man holding her other hand. She blinked in confusion. Alistair's heart clenched. Would she sense who he was? The girl managed a tiny, puzzled smile. "Mummy, who's that?" she asked, her voice frail. Alistair felt his throat go dry. This was it, the moment that should have happened years ago, under drastically different circumstances. He looked to Callista, letting her take the lead on how to answer. After all, he didn't know what Callista had told Aurelia about her father, if anything. Callista inhaled shakily, then gave Aurelia a tender smile. "Aurelia, my love. This is Alistair." Her eyes flickered to him, as if gathering courage. He's your daddy." Aurelia's eyes widened slightly, examining Alistair anew. She was silent for a moment, processing. Then, in a small voice, she asked, "My daddy? Really?" Alistair's chest constricted. He squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, really," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your dad. I'm so happy I finally get to meet you." A single tear slipped down Callista's cheek as she watched Aurelia digest this information. The little girl weakly turned her hand in Alistair's grasp, wrapping her tiny fingers around one of his. She looked between him and her mother. "Are you going to stay?" she whispered. It was impossible to tell what years of questions and longing lay behind those innocent words. But Alistair felt them like an arrow to his soul. He nodded emphatically, a tear escaping his own eye now. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere, Aurelia," he vowed softly. Relief and contentment seemed to wash over Aurelia's face at that promise. Her eyes drifted closed again, still very weak, but on her lips was the faintest hint of a smile. Alistair sat back, his hand never leaving hers. Across the bed, Callista silently mouthed, "Thank you." He didn't respond aloud, but inside, gratitude and determination swirled, thankful that he arrived in time, determined that from this day forward, nothing would ever separate him from his daughter again, and perhaps, if fate was kind, from the woman he had never stopped loving. Later that morning, after Aurelia had drifted back into a peaceful sleep, Callista gently suggested that Alistair step out with her for a moment. The worst of the crisis had passed. Aurelia was stable and resting, and a fresh unit of blood from the city was on its way to ensure she had enough. The pale winter sun was now peeking through the hospital windows, casting light on the long night's shadows. They found a quiet corner of the waiting lounge just outside the ICU. Alistair had been running on adrenaline and fear for hours. In the stillness, the weight of everything began to settle. He rubbed his eyes, weary and emotionally raw. Callista stood facing him, her fingers twisting together nervously. For a long moment, neither knew how to start. Alistair was the one to break the silence. "How long have you been in Willowdale?" he asked softly. It was an easier question than the ones truly burning inside him. Since I left New York," Callista answered, voice low. "I moved back here to my hometown well, right after," she trailed off. She didn't need to finish. They both knew what event hung heavily between those words. Alistair nodded, jaw clenched. He looked down at his hands. 8 years, Callista. 8 years thinking you didn't want me. 8 years not knowing I had a daughter. There was no mistaking the hurt in his tone. Callista felt tears pricking her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. Please believe me, Alistair. Leaving you was the worst thing I ever had to do." He looked up, hazel eyes glistening. Then why? The simple question carried the weight of all his anguish. Why did you leave me like that? That letter. He swallowed hard. You said you didn't love me, that our lives were too different. You broke my heart, Callista. His voice cracked, finally giving way to the tears he'd been holding back. Seeing him cry was unbearable. Callista stepped closer instinctively, trembling. "I lied," she confessed, each word thick with remorse. Every word in that letter was a lie. "I have always loved you. I left because I thought it was the only way to protect you. And later, to protect Aurelia." Alistair's brow furrowed in confusion and pain. "Protect me? From what?" Callista took a shaky breath. Now that the moment was here, it was harder than she'd imagined to relive it all. But he deserved the truth. From your family's disapproval, from having to choose between me and them, from a scandal that could have hurt your future. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if warding off a chill. "Your mother came to see me, after you left for Cambridge." At the mention of his mother, Alistair's expression darkened. What did she do? He asked tightly, though he could already guess. Callista bit her lip. "She offered me money to walk away, to help my family if I promised to never see you again." Alistair muttered a curse under his breath, a rare flash of anger crossing his face. He raked a hand through his hair. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea she—" Callista shook her head. "I refused the money, but she said things that hit so close to my own fears. She said I would hold you back, that we'd both end up hurt, that your destiny was too important. And I had just found out I was pregnant." Her voice broke on the last word, tears sliding down her cheeks. Alistair drew in a sharp breath. Though he knew from context, hearing her say it still jolted him. He stepped closer, gently cupping Callista's face in his hands before he even realized what he was doing. His thumb brushed away a tear on her cheek. "You were pregnant," he repeated softly, pain and compassion mingling in his eyes. "And you went through that alone?" Callista closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite herself. It had been so long since she felt the warmth of his hand on her skin. "I was terrified," she admitted. "I thought, if your mother already despised me, how would she react to a baby? I feared she might try to take her away or make legal trouble. And I felt I had nothing to offer you except love. No money, no status, just a whole lot of problems. I thought leaving was the best thing I could do for you and for our child. So I wrote that awful letter to make you hate me, so you wouldn't come after me." Alistair's eyes brimmed anew. "Callista, how could you think I wouldn't have wanted you or our baby?" He said, voice shaking. "You were everything to me. I would have dropped out of law school in a heartbeat, married you in a courthouse, done anything if it meant keeping our family together." She gazed up at him, her heart aching at the sincerity in his face. "I was young and scared, and your mother was very convincing. She told me I'd ruin your life." A muscle in Alistair's jaw twitched. "My mother," he spat quietly, anger evident. "She ruined our lives with her meddling." Callista placed a hand over his where it held her cheek, feeling the tension there. "Don't blame only her. I made the choice to leave. Maybe she pushed me, but I ultimately made that terrible decision. I thought I was being noble, but now I see I just caused us all so much pain." Fresh tears rolled down her face. "I'm so sorry, Alistair. I'm sorry for taking Aurelia from you. I'm sorry for not trusting you enough to handle the situation together. I'm sorry for breaking both our hearts." Her voice dissolved into a sob. Alistair couldn't bear it anymore. He pulled her into his arms. Callista sank against his chest, clutching his shirt as years of pent-up sorrow poured out. He held her tightly, resting his chin atop her head. His own tears spilled freely, dampening her hair. They stayed like that for what felt like ages, two souls clinging together amid the shared wreckage of their past choices. Finally, Alistair tilted her face up. "I forgive you," he said, voice rough but resolute. I forgive you for everything, Callista. I know you thought you were doing the right thing. And hearing what my mother did, I'm furious, but mostly I'm just—" He paused, eyes searching hers. "I'm just so grateful fate gave me a second chance to be in your lives. In both your lives." Callista let out a shaky breath of relief. She hadn't realized how desperately she'd longed to hear those words until this moment. "I don't deserve it, but thank you," she whispered. "I don't know if I can ever forgive myself, but knowing you don't hate me, it means everything." Alistair gently brushed back a strand of her hair. There was a tenderness in his gaze that made her heart flutter, reminiscent of how he used to look at her long ago. "I could never hate you," he murmured. "I tried, after that letter, but I couldn't. You were the love of my life. You still are." Callista's breath caught. "Alistair, But before she could respond, a new voice cut in. "Alistair, what on earth is going on here?" They broke apart to find Vivian Davenport standing a few paces away, clad in a tailored suit and heels clicking on the hospital tile. Somehow, despite the early hour and the unexpected venue, she looked as composed as if she were attending a board meeting. But her eyes were wide with shock as she took in the scene, her son tear-stained and holding Callista. Callista equally tearful, and beyond them, through the glass, a small girl lying in a hospital bed. Alistair stiffened, stepping protectively in front of Callista as if shielding her from an oncoming threat. His tone, usually so measured with his mother, was ice cold. "What are you doing here?" Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. "I called your apartment and your assistant. They informed me you'd flown out in the middle of the night for some urgent personal matter. I was worried, so I had Charles fly me up here at once." Her eyes shifted to Callista, then to the ICU room. Unease crossed her features. "Is that—" "Yes," Alistair said shortly. "That's your granddaughter, Mother, Aurelia." There was both pride and accusation in his voice. Vivian inhaled sharply, the color drained from her face. "Granddaughter?" she echoed, barely above a whisper. Her gaze found Callista's, full of confusion and something like fear. "You had Alistair's child?" Callista straightened, wiping her cheeks and mustering as much dignity as she could. "Yes, Mrs. Davenport, 8 years ago. Her name is Aurelia Fielding." She emphasized her own last name pointedly, a quiet rebuke that Alistair's mother had known nothing of the girl's existence due to her own machinations. Vivian looked as if she might faint. She glanced through the glass again at the sleeping child, seeing the unmistakable resemblance now. She opened her mouth to speak, but Alistair cut her off. "Mother, there are some things you need to hear," he said, steel underlying each word. His arms slid around Callista's waist gently, in a gesture both supportive and declarative. "I know what you did. Callista told me how you interfered, how you drove her away with threats and money. All these years, I believed she abandoned me out of greed or cold feet, when in fact you orchestrated it. Because of that, I missed out on my daughter's childhood. We both did." His voice shook with anger. "I cannot begin to express how betrayed I feel by you." Vivian's eyes brimmed with tears. A rare sight. "Alistair, I thought I was doing the right thing. Everything I did was for your future." "Stop," he snapped, and Vivian flinched. Alistair rarely raised his voice to his mother. "You had no right to decide what was best for my heart or my family. You owe Callista an apology at the very least. And you owe Aurelia." His voice broke, and he took a moment to compose himself. "You owe your granddaughter a chance to know her grandmother, if Callista even permits it after what you've done." Callista felt Alistair's hand tremble where it held her. She knew this confrontation cost him dearly, despite everything. He loved his mother, and had been raised to obey her. But now he was firmly on Callista's side, on their family's side, and that realization filled her with gratitude and love. She placed her hand over Alistair's, giving a reassuring squeeze. Vivian stepped forward, eyes imploring. I am sorry," she said, looking from Alistair to Callista. "I see now that I was wrong, horribly wrong. I thought I was protecting my son, but I was blinded by my own prejudice and pride, and I've caused unspeakable pain." She hesitated, then turned fully to Callista, shoulders sagging in an uncharacteristic show of vulnerability. Callista, dear, I misjudged you terribly. You loved my son. You still do, I can see that. And you've raised that beautiful little girl so well, all on your own. I beg your forgiveness, though I know I might not deserve it. Callista looked at the older woman, seeing genuine remorse etched on Vivian's elegant face. This was the formidable, icy Vivian Davenport, brought low by the consequences of her actions. In that moment, Callista let go of a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The anger and resentment she'd nursed for years suddenly felt heavy. Setting it down would be a relief. Mrs. Davenport, Vivian, she said quietly, the past can't be changed. What happened was tragic for all of us. I won't pretend it's easy to forget, but Aurelia's life is what matters now. She deserves a family that loves her. All of us do. Callista's voice softened. I forgive you, not for your sake, but for ours, so we can move forward. Vivian covered her mouth, a small sob escaping as tears spilled onto her cheeks. Alistair looked equally stunned and moved by Callista's words. Regaining her composure, Vivian asked in a tentative voice, May I see her, my granddaughter? Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. If this moment touched you, make sure to like this video and drop a comment telling us what lessons stood out most to you. Do you believe people deserve second chances? Subscribe now and stay with our storytelling family for more stories that remind us love can heal even the deepest scars. Alistair looked to Callista for permission. Callista gave a tiny nod. She's sleeping now, but, of course. Her recovery is thanks to Alistair's quick action tonight. Vivian slowly approached the window, peering in at Aurelia's sleeping form. She's so beautiful, she whispered. Looks just like Alistair did at that age. Emotion choked her voice. After a few moments, she turned back to them. Thank you for allowing me to meet her. I know I have much to make amends for. I don't expect things to be fixed overnight, but I would like to be part of her life, if you'll both have me in time. Alistair's stance relaxed slightly. The righteous anger in him had burned out, leaving a weary sadness. We'll see, Mother. That depends on your actions going forward. Words aren't enough. Vivian nodded in understanding. She straightened, some of her poise returning. I'll leave you all for now. This is a family matter, and clearly you three are a family. She offered a trembling smile. I truly am sorry. I will do everything I can to prove it to you both, and to Aurelia when she's well enough. Please keep me updated on her condition. With that, Vivian Davenport quietly left the hallway, her figure retreating, down the corridor looking smaller than Callista had ever seen her. The moment Vivian disappeared, Alistair exhaled a long breath and turned to Callista. Are you all right? He asked gently. Callista realized her hands were shaking from the intensity of the confrontation. I think so, she said. That was unexpected. I didn't think I'd ever see an apology from your mother. Alistair managed a faint smile. It's a day of surprises for all of us, I suppose. He then took both of Callista's hands in his expression turning earnest. What you said to her. You truly are incredible, you know that? Your capacity to forgive after everything, it humbles me. Callista squeezed his hands. I did it for Aurelia. Holding on to hate doesn't serve anyone, and maybe I did it for us too. We've all been stuck in the past for so long. I want to move forward. He stepped closer, gently drawing her into an embrace once more. This time it was calm, full of understanding. Callista rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. Moving forward together, Alistair murmured into her hair. If you'll have me back, Callista, I know I have a lot to catch up on. I've missed 8 years of moments with you, and with our little girl. But I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to both of you. Callista looked up at him. In his face she saw the same man she fell in love with. Older, yes, with a few more lines of worry around his eyes, but still so handsome, and still gazing at her with unmistakable love. I kept thinking of you all these years, she admitted softly, wishing things could have been different. And now you're here. It feels like a dream I'm afraid to wake up from. He brushed the back of his fingers along her cheek. It's real. I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere, except where you and Aurelia are. He hesitated, emotion welling in his eyes again. I love you, Callista. I never stopped, not for 1 second. And I love our daughter, more than I can even put into words right now. A radiant, tearful smile broke across Callista's face. Those were words she had yearned to hear for so long. I love you too, Alistair. I always have, and I always will. Alistair let out a breath of pure relief and joy. Slowly he leaned down, giving her every chance to pull away. But Callista rose on her toes to meet him, closing the distance as their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and deep with longing. It was a kiss of homecoming and new beginnings, salty with tears yet sweet with the promise of a future they once thought lost. When they finally parted, Callista rested her forehead against his, both of them smiling through their tears. In that quiet hospital hallway, they had found their way back to each other. The road ahead would no doubt have challenges, healing to do, trust to rebuild, a daughter to raise together, but they would face it as partners, hand in hand. A soft tap on the glass interrupted their embrace. A nurse peeked out, her face bright. Sorry to disturb, she said quietly, but your daughter's awake again, and asking for you both. Callista and Alistair quickly wiped their eyes and returned to Aurelia's bedside. The little girl looked much better, still pale but alert and propped up on pillows now. She managed a small grin when she saw them come in, holding hands. Mummy, I had a dream, Aurelia said, her voice still weak but full of wonder. I dreamed I had a daddy, and he was here when I woke up. Callista's heart melted. She sat on one side of the bed and Alistair on the other. It's not a dream, my love, Callista whispered, smoothing her daughter's hair. Daddy is really here. Alistair reached out and took Aurelia's hand gently. I'm here, Aurelia, he said softly. And I'm going to be here for you always. I promise. Aurelia looked between her parents, absorbing their united presence. Her small fingers curled around her father's hand. Does that mean you'll stay with us, Daddy? She asked. Alistair glanced at Callista with a smile. If it's all right with you and Mommy, I'd like nothing more. Callista nodded, unable to speak past the joyous lump in her throat. Aurelia responded by lifting her arms toward Alistair, indicating she wanted him closer. Despite the monitors and Ivor, Alistair carefully leaned in, gathering his daughter into a gentle hug. Callista wrapped her arms around them both, joining the embrace. They stayed like that for a warm, eternal moment. Mother, father, and child, holding each other at last, a family reunited by love and forgiveness. No words were needed. In the quiet of that morning, in a small hospital room in Willowdale, 3 hearts beat in harmony, full of hope for all the days to come. Chapter 6, Epilogue, A Future Forged in Love. 3 months later, Willowdale, upstate New York. Spring arrived gently in Willowdale, bringing with it blossoms of renewal. In a cozy backyard behind Callista's quaint house, Aurelia squealed with delight as Alistair lifted her high onto his shoulders. She was rosy-cheeked and healthy once more, giggling as she pointed out shapes in the clouds. Callista watched them from the porch, one hand resting over her heart, which felt fuller than it had in years. So much had changed in 3 months. After Aurelia's discharge from the hospital, Alistair had practically moved into Callista's home. At first, sleeping on the couch, insisting on helping care for Aurelia as she regained her strength. Those early weeks were a tender time of bonding, late-night story readings, Alistair learning to braid Aurelia's hair with comical results, and family dinners where laughter far outweighed the years of loneliness. Callista's small town initially buzzed with gossip about the billionaire, who had appeared out of nowhere to stand by the local single mother. But as neighbors saw the genuine love Alistair showed both Callista and Aurelia, their chatter turned to warm support. In many ways, Alistair seemed happier in this simple life, baking cookies with Aurelia or strolling the farmer's market hand in hand with Callista than he ever had in the high-powered boardrooms of New York. Vivian Davenport visited as well, treading carefully as she built a relationship with her granddaughter. To everyone's surprise, the sophisticated woman took to small-town charms readily, joining Callista's mother for church on Sundays and even helping organize a charity bake sale for the local clinic. With humility and persistence, Vivian earned her way back into the family's trust. Her icy exterior melting in the presence of Aurelia's innocent affection. On this bright afternoon, after giving Aurelia a piggyback ride around the yard, Alistair approached the porch, daughter perched proudly on his shoulders. Callista came down the steps to join them, laughing as Aurelia reached out for her mother's hand. Alistair carefully set Aurelia down. "Sweetheart, why don't you pick some daisies for Mommy?" he suggested softly. The girl nodded eagerly and skipped off to the flower beds, humming a little tune. Callista tilted her head curiously at Alistair, who suddenly seemed nervous. He took a deep breath, reaching into his pocket. "Callista," he said, voice gentle yet earnest, "these past months with you and Aurelia have been the happiest of my life. I don't ever want to be apart from either of you again." Her breath caught as he revealed a small velvet box and dropped to one knee on the grass. "I know we already lost so much time, and I intend to cherish every moment we have now. Will you marry me and make our family complete?" He opened the box to reveal a delicate ring glinting in the sunlight. Tears welled in Callista's eyes, a joyous smile spreading across her face. "Yes," she whispered, barely finding her voice. "Yes, of course I will." A delighted grin broke on Alistair's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He rose, and Callista threw her arms around him, both of them laughing and crying at once. Little Aurelia, noticing the commotion, came running back with a fistful of daisies. "Mummy, why are you crying?" she asked, concerned. Callista scooped her daughter into their embrace, kissing her forehead. "These are happy tears, my love. Your daddy just asked me to marry him." Aurelia's eyes widened, then she let out a cheer. "Does that mean we'll all live together now? Like a real family?" Alistair chuckled, ruffling her hair gently. "Exactly. We already are a real family, but now Mommy and Daddy will be husband and wife too." Aurelia clapped her hands, squirming with excitement. "Can I be the flower girl?" "The most beautiful flower girl ever," Callista laughed, hugging her tightly. As the afternoon sun bathed them in its warm glow, the little family sat together on the porch swing. Aurelia settled on Alistair's lap, playing with the petals of her daisies, while Callista leaned against his shoulder, his arm around both his girls. There was a profound peace in that moment, a sense that the storms of the past had passed, and ahead lay clear skies. They had learned hard lessons through their journey. Callista, in her desire to protect those she loved, realized that secrecy and lies had only caused more pain. Honesty and trust would have been the better path. Alistair discovered the strength to forgive and the courage to stand up to prejudice and expectation, choosing love over all else. Even Vivian found redemption in humility, learning that true family means accepting and supporting one another unconditionally. Most of all, they all learned that love, steadfast, forgiving, and patient, was the greatest treasure life could offer. No amount of wealth or social standing could replace the simple joy of being together, of family. Callista closed her eyes for a moment, offering a silent thank you to whatever fate or providence had brought Alistair back to them. She had kept a secret out of fear, but love had found a way to right the wrong. In the gentle creak of the porch swing and the sound of Aurelia's soft humming, Callista heard the melody of hope and happiness restored. Alistair pressed a kiss to Callista's temple, then one to Aurelia's head. He met Callista's gaze, his eyes shining with contentment. No words were needed as their fingers intertwined, wearing matching rings. That symbolized promises long overdue but now finally fulfilled. In that quiet little corner of the world, a once broken family healed and became whole. Together, they looked forward to a future built on the solid foundation of truth, forgiveness, and enduring love. A future where their daughter would grow up surrounded not by secrets, but by the open arms of a family united. Love and truth will always find a way, even after years of separation and secrets. Honesty, forgiveness, and courage to do what's right can heal even the deepest wounds. No matter the odds, be it differences in social class or past mistakes, a family built on genuine love and understanding can overcome anything. And in the end, there is no greater wealth in life than the love we share with those we call family. Thank you for watching until the end of this emotional journey. If Callista and Alistair's story moved you, show your love by liking this video right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story of love, loss, and redemption. Share your biggest takeaway in the comments. Was it forgiveness, family, or faith in love? Share this video with someone who needs hope today, because love always finds a way home.